Hello. I'd like to make a speech to you today about the topic why we sleep. There are some technical terms which I've noted underneath the video for you, so I would encourage you to have a look at those just before we begin. So if you're ready, I'll start. Ladies and gentlemen, are you getting enough sleep? I'm sure this is a question that many of us have asked ourselves during this period of lockdown for the COVID-19 pandemic. Personally, I have used this time to do a bit of reading, and one of the books that I have read is this one here, Why We Sleep, by the British scientist Matthew Walker. So today I'd like to share with you some information, some very interesting information, I would argue, that I've gleaned from this book. And I'll focus my speech on four key areas. I'd like to look at, first of all, what sleep actually is. Secondly, and crucially, why we sleep. I'd like to look at some of the most common problems associated with sleep, or the lack of sleep, as the case often is. And finally, I'd like to turn to some of the solutions that are posited by Mr. Walker in his book. So firstly then, what is sleep? It seems such a basic question as to seem completely ridiculous. And well it might, because in actual fact, sleep is something that is common to the entire animal kingdom. We don't know any species that doesn't require some kind of sleep, from the largest whale right down to the smallest insect. It is a universal need. And some creatures in the animal kingdom sleep in incredible ways. Did you know, for example, that dolphins and whales have the ability to sleep with just half of their brain at any one time? This is not something that they always do, but it is an incredible ability that they have, and is thought to be associated to the need in particular for young dolphins and whales to continue to swim in order to avoid falling prey to predators in the ocean. I'm sure that we will all recognize that when it comes to sleep, there are two types of people in this world. And we might refer to them, funnily enough, in terms of two different animals. We can talk about morning larks. I'm sure you know these people. They often get up very early in the morning. They seem extremely lively and animated, even at this very early hour. They'll often be whistling as they go about their morning routine, brushing their teeth, in the shower, etc. So you have the morning lark, and then on the other side of the coin, the night owl. And equally, I'm sure you'll recognize this type of person who tends to go to bed very late and has some difficulty rising in the morning, and may not be quite so enthusiastic or chipper as their morning lark counterparts. So whichever one you are, I'm sure that you recognize yourself in one of those groups. We might ask ourselves though, and here we come to the crux of the matter, why do we sleep? Why do we have this need for slumber? Well, indeed, there are many, many different reasons for this, which are outlined in Matthew Walker's book. Firstly, it's important to distinguish between the two different types of sleep. And these types of sleep are named according to the movement of our eyeballs, believe it or not. We have rapid eye movement, or REM sleep, and the other type of sleep, which is simply called NREM, or non-rapid eye movement sleep. REM sleep, as the name suggests, is a kind of sleep where our eyeballs move in a fast and frenetic manner while we are unconscious and asleep. Whereas in NREM sleep, our eyes do not move, and along with the rest of our body, are temporarily paralyzed. Now, one of the ways that we can also distinguish between these two types of sleep is the brainwave activity that can be observed using an electroencephalogram or EEG machine. The brainwaves for REM sleep are pretty much like the eye movements, very fast and very frenetic. They're not very stable at all. Whereas during NREM sleep, the brainwaves are slow and much more uniform and regular. Indeed, the metaphor used by Matthew Walker in the book is that of a football crowd chanting a particular song, for example, and of them reaching a crescendo and a diminuendo at the same time. And this is very obvious when you see it on the EEG readout. REM sleep is also often referred to as dream sleep, because it is the stage of sleep during which we dream. Now, dreams, of course, are something that has always fascinated humankind. And one of the main issues addressed in the book is, do dreams have a purpose? Scientists have spent many centuries trying to answer this question, and it is indeed true. Dreams do indeed have a purpose. And they have three main purposes. The first is to do with creativity. I'm sure many of us will have had the experience of waking up in the middle of the night after having had a particularly vivid dream. And you may even keep a notepad at the side of your bed in order to write down ideas, whether it be a musical idea, whether it be an idea for a particular project that you're working on at that time. Dreams are indeed laboratories for creative ideas. Secondly, they also help us with abstract thinking. Often when we are faced with an extremely difficult problem to solve, once we dream specifically about that problem, we find it much easier to solve, and this is scientifically proven. A third extremely interesting function of dreams is that of therapy. It's been found that, again, dreaming specifically about a traumatic experience is one of the most effective ways of helping people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder begin to come to terms with their experience. So though they may not be fully cured of such a disorder by dreaming about this experience, it certainly seems to be one of the most effective ways the human body has of helping us cope with trauma. NREM sleep, so the other type of sleep on the other hand, has a more refining role. And for example, it's particularly involved in converting short-term memories into long-term memories and refining motor skills that we've learned, such as playing a musical instrument or indeed language skills. So, as you can see, there really is a plethora of reasons as to why we do actually sleep and why it's beneficial for every organism, but particularly in this case for human beings. However, there are many problems that have been associated with sleep. Health problems, which have also translated into societal problems. One of these problems is that of drowsy driving. I'm sure we're all aware of the dangers of drink driving, and indeed governments invest huge amounts of money in raising awareness of the dangers of drink driving. However, drowsy driving is equally as dangerous, if not more, due to its commonplace nature. To give you an idea of this, a study by the AAA Foundation in 2016 found that if you sleep for less than 4 hours, your risk of crashing is increased by 11.5 times vis-a-vis a situation where you are completely rested. Also, if you spend 19 consecutive hours awake, this is the equivalent of being legally drunk. A further problem associated with sleep is the misdiagnosis of certain conditions, such as ADHD, for example, attention deficit disorder. Particularly children who are diagnosed as having ADHD often are not actually truly displaying symptoms of this disorder, but the symptoms rather are those of sleep deprivation, and they're extremely similar. Many historical figures have seen the fact that they have famously slept very little as a badge of honour. They've been proud of this fact. And these figures include the ex-US President Ronald Reagan, ex-UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and indeed Donald Trump. It's interesting to note, though, that both Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher succumbed to Alzheimer's disease, and indeed this is one of the diseases that we know that sleep deprivation increases your risk of. A final problem associated with sleep is the overuse and overprescription of sleeping pills. Sleeping pills may render you unconscious, but the type of unconsciousness is certainly not equivalent to natural sleep, nor do you get the same benefits from this type of unconsciousness as you do from natural sleep. Instead, you are sedated. And sleeping pills, again, have been found to increase people's risks of diseases such as cancer and heart disease. More and more people are being encouraged to explore treatments which are non-pharmaceutical, such as cognitive behavioural therapy, if they are experiencing chronic conditions such as insomnia. So now we've spoken about the problems, but what of the solutions then for sleep deprivation? Well, I'd like to mention three in particular. Firstly is the issue of light. Now, 100 years ago, this was not such a big problem, because generally human beings were regulated by the circadian rhythm, by the rising and falling, or setting rather, of the sun. However, nowadays we all have smartphones, laptop computers, all kinds of gadgets in our bedrooms which emit a kind of cool blue LED light. This type of light is extremely damaging to our natural sleep rhythm, as it interferes with the hormone melatonin, which needs to build up in the brain to induce sleep. One solution to this is removing gadgets from your bedroom, of course, and there are now types of filters you can use to change the type of light that is emitted from your devices to one that is less damaging to your melatonin production. The second solution is that of temperature. It's much easier for you to fall asleep in a room that's slightly too cold than in a room that's slightly too hot. This is because your body temperature needs to drop slightly in order for you to fall asleep. Some things you can do to regulate the temperature in your room, or regulate your body temperature rather, are to have a bath or a shower before bed, which allows your body temperature to drop more easily. To avoid excessive exercise before bed, immediately before bed, and obviously to have your thermostat set properly. The third solution is that which I've already mentioned, which is to avoid sleeping pills and to explore non-pharmaceutical treatments for any sleep deprivation. For people who are suffering from insomnia, there are 6 key strategies that can be used. Firstly, and most importantly, establish a regular schedule for sleeping. This means that you go to bed and wake up at the same time, no matter what day of the week it is. Secondly, go to bed only when you are tired. Thirdly, if you are in bed and not falling asleep, it's better to get up after around 20 minutes and do something relaxing until you feel sleepy. This could be an activity such as reading, for example, and you should avoid any electronic devices. Fourthly, you should avoid napping in the daytime, particularly in the late afternoon. Fifthly, you should try to mentally decelerate before bed. Again, avoiding screens, perhaps reading or doing something creative such as drawing. And finally, you should remove any visible clocks from your room, as clock watching can cause anxiety, which can make sleep extremely difficult to achieve. So in conclusion, sleep deprivation is a true scourge of our modern society. It affects our mental and physical health in ways that we don't always realize. We don't take this issue seriously enough, but we should, not just for our own health, but for the sake of our national and global economy as well. Insufficient sleep is estimated to cost countries over 2% of their GDP every year. This is about the same amount that each country spends on their military on average. Many huge companies have already realized the need to change their practices. Companies such as Nike and Google now offer much more flexible hours to cater to their employees' different sleeping patterns and preferences. Facebook have even started to install sleep pods in some of their offices. Can you imagine going for a nap at work? It could be the future. Sleep loss is an epidemic, every bit as damaging as COVID-19, if not more. If there's one piece of advice that you should follow if you are finding it difficult to sleep, it's to establish a regular sleep schedule. And that way you should be well rested and able to tackle the day ahead with enthusiasm. Thank you for your attention.